Hey Subfuries! This past season we were introduced to an island that is soaked in mythology and mystery and dragon culture. VANAHEIM. It's the legendary final resting place of dragons and they found it. Now there are so many details with this island that we need to talk about, like why do only certain types of dragons go to VANAHEIM? How did these sentinels come to protect it? And do dragons have funerals? But today we'll be discussing the elephant in the room, or should I say, the Bewilderbeast?
Terrible joke.
Yes, that's right. Later on in the season, we find that the Isle of VANAHEIM itself folds around the skeleton of a Bewilderbeast, the tidal Class 10 Leviathan that we meet in the second movie. But before we jump into all of that, I just wanted to let you know that we have indeed picked the design for the official SUBFURY t-shirts. I have already ordered a t-shirt of my own so that I can check the quality, and once I've done that, I can tell you all about it and we can get to supporting the charities that we chose together, the World Wildlife Fund and A21, which works to stop slavery. On to the theory! Now, VANAHEIM is first alluded to by Marla and Throg as the Eruptodon begins to die, and that it, like all Eruptodons before it, would then fly off to VANAHEIM to have a peaceful death. Think of it like a dragon rest home that you cannot leave. But these stories and legends of VANAHEIM aren't just from the defenders of the wing. Hiccup and Fishlegs have heard of them too. They recognize that VANAHEIM was the legendary place that dragons go before they die. If both those on Berk and on the wing have heard of this same legend, it must be really old, hundreds if not thousands of years old. But how did VANAHEIM begin? What first caused dragons to start migrating there? And how did a Bewilderbeast end up there? These are all questions that as Subfuries we are duty bound to answer.
Getting really sick of those builders out there, so much noise.
VANAHEIM is rocky with sea stacks and huge stony spikes shooting out above the island, except they're not just stony spikes. Hiccup and the gang later learn that the body of a massive dragon runs down the entire spine of the island. Those spikes, it turns out, are the Bewilderbeast's antler crown things. And the peculiar arch over the island, they're the Bewilderbeast's ribs. And the lie of the land is broad and long, just like the Bewilderbeast's body. Now, the gang at the time has absolutely no idea what this kind of dragon is, but we do, don't we? We can see the Bewilderbeast's tusk and skull. Beyond the Bewilderbeast's skeleton, there's really only sparse beaches. In fact, the more I looked at it, the more I realized that it wasn't that a Bewilderbeast came to the island of VANAHEIM to die. The island of VANAHEIM itself is made out of the skeleton of a Bewilderbeast, now aged and covered in grass and trees.
But why would dragons still go to VANAHEIM hundreds of years later, Tim?
Great question, you unusually adorable lizard. Our first clue is that VANAHEIM is found in the far north, even further north than Berk, which is...
It's 12 days north of Hopeless and a few degrees south of freezing to death.
Undoubtedly it's in the Arctic Circle, even if it has some greenery to it, which is interesting because Bewilderbeasts themselves are notably Arctic deep-sea dragons. Just as Volker's Bewilderbeast made its nest in the far north beyond Berk, it's my personal theory that where VANAHEIM is found in the show was once the nest to one of the most powerful Bewilderbeasts ever. Just looking at the size of the skull, we can see that the VANAHEIM Bewilderbeast is at least twice the size of the Bewilderbeast that we see in How to Train Your Dragon 2. Look at the comparison between the two. To be this massive, he must have been old, ancient, old enough that it's my theory that he wasn't hunted down or killed by another Bewilderbeast, but he died of old age. Bewilderbeasts are rarely ever challenged by anything other than another Bewilderbeast, and even this is rare given how few there are throughout the entire world. Volker says as much in the second movie.
One of the very few that still exist.
And we're given the impression that Bewilderbeasts are relatively peaceful creatures that don't necessarily fight unless they really need to. And I started to wonder, if a Bewilderbeast dies, what happens to the dragons that follow it? Well, we know what happens when one Bewilderbeast defeats another. The dragons follow the new alpha as their protector and their king. But if a Bewilderbeast dies of old age, there's nobody to control them. nobody to command them, a power vacuum. And that is what I think we're seeing here with Vanaheim. The relationship that dragons share with their alpha is irresistible and instinctual and strong. They will go to war for their alpha, they will bow and respect their alpha. And in the recent comic book, The Serpent's Heir, we learned that dragons actually have traditions and rituals. In dragon culture, there will be food offerings for a new alpha, like they did for Toothless, and Hickson talks about a royal procession of dragons taking them to a new island. Could that be what we're seeing here? A form of tradition or ritual for their alpha, the Bewilderbeast. There are about 13 different tombs on Vanaheim, 13 different types of dragons that fly to Vanaheim when their time comes, but that is certainly not all of the dragon species out there. And judging by the number of bones that we see in one of the tombs, it's not even all of a single species, like Deadly Nadders. But there are specific groups of dragons that do fly to Vanaheim when their time to die comes. It's my theory that this behaviour evolved when a Bewilderbeast died of old age, with nobody to replace it, no heir and no challenger. The nest eventually melts and the populations of dragons begin to migrate away, with no alpha to control and unite them all. But that bond and loyalty that they still instinctually felt to that alpha Bewilderbeast was never broken. Just as dragons have these instinctual traditions, like offering up food to a new alpha or escorting Toothless out of respect, I think that same group of dragons might be instinctively drawn back to the place that their Bewilderbeast died, when they too know that they're about to die. In other words, because that Bewilderbeast was never defeated, that bond with it was never truly broken. So they still follow its example and return to the same place when they too know they are about to die. Almost as if instinctively they still feel it is a safe place. This behaviour could have been so widely practiced by dragon packs under this particular Bewilderbeast that it was inherited through the generations, until eventually humans started noticing that dragons would sometimes fly north when they neared death, and they called it Vanaheim. This would explain why only some types of dragons seem to fly northward: Eruptodons but not Thunderdrums, Monstrous Nightmares but not Hot Burples, because only some dragon populations were under this particular Bewilderbeast, so the behaviour was only inherited by certain groups. To put it simply, there was once a Bewilderbeast that ruled over a group of Monstrous Nightmares, Gronkles, Deadly Nadders and more. It protected them, they offered it food as their alpha, and they loved it as king. After hundreds of years, this Bewilderbeast passed away from old age. Without their alpha, the Gronkles, Deadly Nadders, the Monstrous Nightmares and all else began to migrate away from the nest. But they still remained loyal to their king and followed his example. So when they too came to die, they flew off to the same place that their Bewilderbeast did. Their children followed their parents' example until it became a tradition in these dragon societies to fly off to the same place before each of them passed away. Finally, humans began to notice, and they called this place Vanaheim. Of course, the question remains, when our supreme leader Mishka dies, what will we do then? All hail Mishka! But that's all from me, SUBFuries. My question to you is, what does your heaven look like? What's in there? What makes it perfect? I would have my Spyro games, my books, and I would be a bender. But I'm sorry if this video was a little bit weird and awkward. My voice is being funny and annoying. I'm not quite sure why. In the meantime, I'd love for you to join other SUBFuries. Follow me on Twitter, Wattpad, Facebook, email me or supporting me on Patreon, or send me stuff that you guys have made at the links in the description and address below. Stay nerdy, SUBFuries, and I'll see you in the future.